Hello and welcome to another episode of the Top Dogs podcast here on the Field of 68 Media Network. My name is Rob Doster, and unfortunately, we have another UConn loss that we're going to have to break down here. For the third time in 5 games, the Huskies lost what was effectively a one-possession game, and I'll talk about that in a second. I apologize on getting this out to you on a Monday. I was planning on recording this yesterday. I was down in Auburn on Saturday night, and we did not start after dark until about 11:45 because of the way that Auburn Tennessee game played out. Did not finish until well after 1 a.m. Had an early wake up call to drive from Auburn to the Atlanta airport to catch a flight home. Got home, spent some time with my kids. Then the Eagles game came on, then football came on. Then I fell asleep on the couch, and it just kind of spiraled. And it was just kind of one of those things. So here we are, early on a Monday morning, talking about UConn's loss to Xavier, and it was a bit of a frustrating loss, but it's also one where, for the third time in this stretch, for the third time since Lee McNeely was gone, UConn lost a game that was decided effectively by one possession. I know that it was a 4-point game, but it was a 2-point game, and UConn had two chances to try to tie or take the lead in the final 30 seconds. Same thing as what happened at the end of the Creighton game, but it is effectively a one possession game to me, and I think I don't really understand where the amount of anger that I'm seeing from some UConn fans here is popping up, right? Like, I think three losses out of 5 games, a 13-6 record on the 14-6 record on the season, 2 games out of first place in the Big East. All things considered, you put that into context, and I think that it's fair to say this has been about a par for the course kind of a year, right? Look, UConn doesn't have their best player right now. They've gone 3-3 since McNeely injured his ankle against DePaul. And if you take the best player off of any team, not just in the Big East, off of any team in college basketball, and you're going to see a bit of a dip. And I'll talk a little bit more about how that kind of manifests in this UConn team, but you're going to see a little bit of a dip. Now, I do think it's also fair to say that when you think about what this loss was, to me, Xavier's a top 20-ish kind of a team, right? They've given away some games on the road that they really should not have given away, right? They lost at TCU in a game they led by double figures. They lost at Cincinnati, a game that led by 7 with, I believe, 3 minutes left in that game. They lost in overtime to UConn when they had a chance to be able to win that thing late. They gave one away at St. John's. They were up by 17. Was it 19? 17 or 19 in the second half there, and ended up giving that one away. Like, they've had 5 or 6 games where they held big leads in the second half and kind of choked it away. And I think that in terms of talent, the fact that they held all those leads tells me a lot about how good this team can be and where this team kind of is this season, and why it's been so disappointing that they are now sitting here on January 27th with a 13-8 record and just a 500 mark in the Big East. But when you put all of those factors together, considering UConn was down by 10 in the first half and looked like they were going to get run out of the gym, and down by 9 with about 6 minutes left, you're on the road, your best player's not there, and you have solo ball running off of a screen, catch and shoot 3, a really good look to take the lead with, I think it was 15 seconds left in the game. I will take that 100 times out of 100 when you consider everything that is going on within there. They got the shot that they wanted. They got their 43% three-point shooter, an open look. They got the guy who's maybe the most dangerous player running off of a screen into a catch and shoot 3, and it just didn't go in. And it's one of those things that's going to happen. He's hit so many unbelievably big shots this year for UConn. He's not going to shoot 100%. And that's just kind of where I am at with it, right? I don't think that you could fault the effort. I don't think that you can fault the coaching ability. I think that there's some things that you can question about, like specific things defensively. I don't think that Alex Caravan played his best game. I don't think that Alex Caravan is fully healthy right now. We can talk about that, but I don't think you can fault the effort. And when you consider that this team is one, not as talented as the last two UConn teams, and two, missing the guy that's going to be a lottery pick and the best player on this team that does so much in terms of what they want to do offensively. I get it, man. It sucks. It's frustrating to be in this spot, but um, it's where they are right now, and there are some things here, positives that I think you can take out of this moving forward, especially considering I believe Liam went through shoot around on Saturday, right? I think he's getting closer to coming back. Maybe it'll be DePaul. I do think that we are going to see him play at Marquette on Saturday, so that's a good thing. That's going to give them a real chance to be able to win that game. So it's kind of trending in the right direction. And the way that I would phrase it is when this team clicks, especially offensively, I think that they have a high enough ceiling to be able to hang with anybody, right? And if that happens to come on a night when Alex is making his threes and Solo's making his threes and Liam gets loose, then you have a chance to be able to beat just about anybody in college basketball. There's also a real possibility they could take a loss very early in the NCAA tournament. It is what it is. But I would also just add that UConn is now at a point where they are going to be going on the road and getting the best slash worst of what every opponent has to offer, right? Duke went through this for a while when Coach K was kind of at the peak of his powers, and Kentucky goes through this all the time in the SEC. And I think the combination of it's UConn, back-to-back national championships, a coach who is unapologetically himself, right? And who kind of revels in playing the villain role. And I think it's fair to say that he revels in playing the villain role. He does not care what anybody thinks about him, and he's just going to do what he does. And he is going to he does not know how to control himself when he gets the heat of competition. That's just who he is. That's just what it's going to be. That's just something that we are going to have to accept and resign ourselves to. But he's going to keep doing it, and he's going to keep having those moments, and it's going to be something that angers rivals fans. And if he continues to have this level of success and this level of fame and this level of notoriety, and UConn keeps on winning, every time you go on the road, especially in league play, you are going to get the kind of environment you got at Xavier. Now, it's worth noting the Cintas Center, when Xavier is rolling, is one of the toughest places to play in college basketball. It is a very underrated home environment. I think they put like 13 or 14,000 in that building. It gets packed. It gets loud. It gets hot. They are not afraid to be able to have themselves a couple of beverages. They are not afraid to be able to get loud and to try to intimidate you. I mean, even on Saturday, I was talking with Robbie Hummel about it before the game or after the game, and like there were Dan Hurley chants that were coming down an hour before the game from the Xavier student section when Hurley wasn't out there and when the UConn team wasn't out there. It was just the students chanting F Dan Hurley to basically a bunch of managers and Xavier players shooting around. That's going to be what the norm is when UConn goes on the road because of the success, because Hurley's embracing being the villain, because it's UConn. Like UConn is UConn. When you got a blue blood coming into your building and your head coach is who he is, this is just how it's going to be. Now, throw in the fact that it's an 8 o'clock tip off. Those students spent the entire day drinking and getting ready for that game, and those environments are going to be something that you have to be able to thrive in if you want to be able to play at that level and win those games. And I think it took a while for UConn to be able to get comfortable in that setting, right? I think that they came out and we're a little. I don't want rattle is the wrong word, but you have to weather the storm. You have to weather that energy burst that you're going to get from the home team playing in front of that crowd. You have to be able to stay close enough where once they kind of go through that burn through that first kind of huge rush through the first TV timeout and the second TV timeout, that you can fight your way back and be able to have a chance to be within striking distance towards the end of the first half and in the second half. And that's exactly what UConn did. And that you got to give them credit for that, right? And it's important to also note that this is the first time a lot of the guys on this roster are truly experiencing this. Look at where they've played on the roll so far this season, right? At Texas, whatever. At Butler, probably better, not great. At DePaul, whatever. At Villanova, I was at that game. It was in the Finn. It was fine. It wasn't anything super intimidating. It gets loud in that building. It's packed. It's small. But it was not like what you saw at the Cintas Center. And at Georgetown, they put 15,000 people in Georgetown, but that was not what we saw at the Cintas Center last night. For a lot of these guys, for Solo, for Jalen Stewart, for someone like an Aiden Mahaney, right? I think it's the first time they've really played major minutes dealing with that kind of environment. Aiden probably got it at Gonzaga, but the first time at UConn playing in front of that environment, right? It's the first time that Haas has had to do that as the starting point guard. It's the first time Sampson's had to do that as the starting 5-man. It's the first time that Jaden Ross has really had. So I think that there really is a learning curve when it comes to that. And the fact that UConn took a punch, ate it, and fought back is something that is really impressive. And I don't think it's something that should be overlooked in terms of the way that we are evaluating them, in terms of the way that you are kind of understanding the context of the season, and in terms of the way that you look at this team, because they did not have their best player. They did not have Liam McNeely. And I don't know how many times I can kind of go over that. Well, you got to fight through. It's got to be the next man up. It's easier to do in football when the players are more replaceable, right? Like Liam McNeely is a functionally operates kind of as your quarterback on this team, and not having him is a big loss. All right, let's get into what specifically happened in this actual game. A couple of takeaways. We don't need to go through it too much, but a couple of specific takeaways is, one, I actually thought UConn's half-court defense was better on Saturday than it's been in the past. I thought that their real issues were, one, they were atrocious in transition defense, especially early. There were probably 5 or 6 times where UConn was unable to identify their man and locate their man in transition. And half of them were coming off of made baskets. There was the one where Dalen Swain gets the ball and goes coast to coast and doesn't even get picked up by anyone. It goes dribbles straight into the basket and makes a layup. There's another one where Samson Johnson and Jalen Stewart both run to Swain in transition, and nobody picks up Zach Fremantle, and he gets a massive dunk. There was another one where, again, 2 guys, I can't remember who it was, 2 guys ran to one player, and Davian McKnight gets a wide open 3. There was one where Aiden Mahaney, after he hit that 3 with about 6 seconds left in the half, looks to the bench, celebrates a little bit, runs back on defense, kind of is flat-footed, and gets beaten by Davian McKnight for a jumper in the corner, which is just like a momentum thing. And there were probably 10 to 12 easy points that Xavier got simply by being able to beat UConn down the floor. Now that's mostly a Xavier thing because of how fast they want to play and how much they want to push in transition. But that is something where I promise you, when they watched film on Sunday, that the guys that dealt with that did not enjoy that film session. I can pretty much guarantee that for a fact. So I also thought that there were a lot of lazy turnovers, right? Haas had one in the second half where McKnight just picked his pocket and goes in for a layup. He had another one where he kind of threw a lazy pass that got stolen by, I think it was Ryan Conwell, who went the other way for a layup. Ahmad Noel had one where they set up this perfect play to solo ball going backdoor, and just underthrew the pass and threw it right to Dalen Swain, who had a steal. There was another one where where it was solo ball who kind of threw a lazy pass. Like there were probably 4 or 5 of those where it was self-inflicted turnovers. And when you combine self-inflicted turnovers with poor transition defense, you get a lot of easy baskets in a game where I give UConn credit for improving what they were doing defensively in the half court. And those were especially brutal because a lot of those were backbreakers and momentum breakers. And when UConn has to fight as hard as they do on the defensive end of the floor and put in the effort that they have to put in to be able to get a stop and get a miss and end a possession, seeing somebody just get a wide open layup is one of those ones where it's like, well, we can't fucking afford that. So those were things that they're going to have to work on. They're going to have to pick up on, and they're going to have to kind of solve. But that's another situation where I think some of that will be fixed when McNeely gets back. One other thing I wanted to add was I thought that was the best game that Samson Johnson has played for UConn in a UConn jersey. And maybe it wasn't, maybe I'm not thinking of something, but the effort that dude plays with, he probably had 3 blocks where he came out of nowhere on what should have been a wide open layup, and he somehow got to it and made a play that I don't think anybody else in college basketball can make. There are things that he can do that nobody else in the sport is capable of doing because of his length, because of his athleticism, because of how twitchy he is. He is not a perfect basketball player by any stretch of the imagination. There are things that that can be exploited. There are flaws that he has. It's just who he is. But there are things that he can do that are energy giving plays that can take away easy baskets. And the one thing that I don't think anybody can ever question is how hard that dude plays. And that's probably why he's in the starting lineup and is beloved by that coaching staff as he is. So shout out to Samson Johnson. I thought that he was really, really good. If you haven't heard by now, we have partnered with BetMGM Sportsbook. We're going to be using BetMGM lines to make all of our picks, and we'll have special offers for the listeners, the viewers of the Field of 68 throughout the year. If you haven't signed up for BetMGM yet, you can use bonus code FIELD, and you will get up to a $1,500 first bet offer on your first wager with BetMGM. The best part, all you need to do is deposit and bet $10 of your own hard-earned money to be eligible. Here's how you make it work. Download the BetMGM app and sign up using that bonus code FIELD. Deposit at least $10 and place your first wager on any game, and you will receive up to $1,500 in bonus bets if your bet loses. Just make sure that you use that bonus code FIELD when you sign up. BetMGM is going to have some fun offers available throughout the NBA playoffs. Bet insurance tokens, odds boost, and what I love, a nice parlay boost or two from time to time, as well as a ridiculous array of player prop bets for any sport that you could possibly imagine betting on. BetMGM is and always will be the king of the prop bet. So go download the BetMGM app, use the bonus code FIELD, and sign up today. And while I've got you, a quick request. The best way to support the Field of 68 content that you get for free is to engage with us. Rate and review the podcast. Like and share the YouTube videos. Tell your friends about us. It all helps in a world where the algorithm is king. And now, back to the show. Now that the college basketball season is in full swing, you need to make sure that you have access to the best betting tool on the market, the Rhythm app. Spelled RITHMM, is a data-backed app that uses AI and analytics to identify inefficiencies in betting lines and the player prop market that will allow you, the user, to profit. You can create customized, analytics-driven betting models tailored to your personal preferences as a bettor. Users have access to up-to-the-second against the spread data. And if you're like me and you understand pictures better than numbers on a screen, Rhythm's internal trend analysis provides you with the kind of graphs that will allow you to evaluate past results and project future performance in a visual way. Every Division I college basketball team is included in the Rhythm's metrics. Free subscribers to the Field of 68 Daily will get 25% off for a Rhythm subscription. Use the QR code on the screen to sign up or download at the link in the description. I think that right now, more than anything as well, look, I've kind of been saying quite a bit on this pod that I think it's very difficult to judge what UConn is when Liam McNeely is not on the floor, when they don't have him, right? I think that seeing them go from being the second best offense in the sport to the ninth best offense in the sport tells you everything you need to know about what he can do. Seeing them go from, I believe it was 75th in defensive efficiency to 132nd in defensive efficiency without McNeely tells you a lot of what they do. But more than anything else, just look at the way teams are playing them. Like the book is out, the scouting report is out. Teams know what they have to do. Without McNeely, they blow up actions. Either you over like however it is. There's different ways that you can do it. Xavier gave him like a multiple different looks. Sometimes they were top locking. Sometimes they were switching everything 1 through 4. Sometimes they were switching everything 1 through 5. Sometimes they were only switching specific pin downs between specific players. Sometimes it was a little bit of both. They were doing a lot of different things to try to confuse UConn on that end of the floor. And some of it worked, some of it didn't. UConn was able to get in some of their actions. It did not quite flow as freely as you normally would expect. But the bottom line is this: what teams are going to try to do is take away all of that off ball stuff and dare the guards to win. The reason why Aiden Mahaney really got loose in this game is because Xavier was basically saying, we're going to make you play 2-on-2. We're going to make Aiden Mahaney and Samson Johnson or Terrace Reed play 2-on-2 with whoever's guarding Aiden and whoever got switched onto the big. And it ends up being a ball screen, and it ends up being a chance for Aiden to kind of be able to do the thing that he does best, which is get to his right hand, get to the basket, either finish around the rim, hit a pull-up three, or kick out to somebody in the corner, right? And that's what he did 6 or 7 times to pretty good effect. I think he finished with, 14 points and 4 assists. Games like that are going to be really, really important for him to get going and get cooking. But it's also worth noting that, one, when he is in that role, UConn takes a pretty big hit on the defensive end of the floor, right? There were lineups where they had Haas and Aiden and Solo Ball out there together with Samson Johnson and Terrace Reed. Like, we're probably never going to see that again. But when you have those 2 smaller guards and sometimes 3 smaller guards out there, it becomes relatively easy to be able to pick and choose the matchup you want to take advantage of. Because, I mean, how many times did Mahaney end up on Dalen Swain, who was 6'8" and a slasher? Like, he's just gonna go dribble to 6 feet away from the rim and elevate over Mahaney. That's how he's gonna do it, and that's exactly what he did. So, I think that was part of the problem on both ends of the floor, right? And I think that when you watch what UConn was doing when they had McNeely, so many of these questions and concerns will be solved with his presence and with his ability back in the lineup and back in the rotation. I think part of it is you have a bigger player that can kind of get into those actions and is more effective at making plays for other guys. I think McNeely is as good as any player in the Big East when it comes to doing the things that Hurley wants him to do, which is getting those DHOs, getting those ball screens, curl off those picks, and basically get to your right hand, get into the lane, get into I keep calling it the 2-on-1 situations. When you come off of a screen and your man is trailing you, you're looking in front of you, you got the big guy rolling, you're driving to the basket on the right side of the lane, the big guy's rolling on the left side of the lane, you got the defender in the middle playing drop coverage, and since defenses aren't helping off of the guys on the wings, you're playing 2-on-1 right there in the paint. And McNeely, I think, is UConn's best player and maybe the best player in the Big East at thriving in those situations. And right now, what defenses are doing is forcing UConn into those situations because they don't think that Diarra and Mahaney are good enough to be able to beat them. And I think that you can make the argument that so far that has probably proven to be something that is true. And I think when Mahaney is there, that a lot of those issues get solved and a lot of those problems get answered and a lot of those question marks are no longer question marks with him. And it's also just something maybe as simple as you move other guys down in the scouting report, right? And all of a sudden, instead of having the best defensive player on Alex Carabin or Solo Ball, now you have to decision where you have to make. Who do we want to use our best perimeter defender on? Is it Solo? Is it Liam? Does this mean Solo is going to be guarded by another smaller guard? Does this mean Alex is now going to have 4s on him again instead of letting those 4s kind of try to deal with Jalen Stewart? It changes. It just changes so much of the dynamic of what you're dealing with him back on the floor and having his presence out there. And the way that I would kind of frame it is shout out to Penfield, because I think that I went back and forth a little bit with him on Saturday night, but if you can find a way to keep Sampson playing the way he's been playing recently and maintain this level of confidence for Aiden Mahaney, you get Alex Caravan, one, healthy, but two, back to playing like Alex Caravan, and Terrace Reed can kind of find his way again. And then you get Liam back. All of a sudden, you got a team that is much more dangerous than what this group is. And I would make the argument that Liam's presence gets Alex Caravan back to form. Liam's presence makes Terrace Reed that much better because those are two guys that are finishers, right? The heart of hearts, you know, Terrace Reed is a guy where somebody's got to create a post touch for him that he can finish. Someone's got to create a dump off that he can finish. Alex Caravan, when he's had his best, needs someone to create an open three for him that he can shoot. Needs him to create someone to create a closeout opportunity for him where he could beat the guy off the dribble. Like that's just what he does best. And I think that Liam on the floor changes so much about how those guys get used, what they're going to be asked to do, and where the impact of what they do offensively is going to be. So this feels like I'm making excuses. I don't want this to sound like something where I'm just sitting here saying, well, just wait till Liam gets back. But I do think I'm not saying that UConn is going to, as soon as Liam gets back, UConn is going to be a top 5 team in America because I just don't think that that's what this group actually is. But when Liam gets back, they are going to be a top 5 offense in America. They are going to be a much better team defensively for a number of different reasons. I don't think you have as many bad turnovers offensively. I think that you don't have as many transition opportunities to get exposed by. And all of a sudden you have a 6'7" wing that is a better defender than Jalen Stewart, that is a significantly better offensive weapon than Jaden Ross, and is that the program's second best defensive rebounder. Once you get him back in, that makes you better defensively. And all of a sudden, you go from being a team that is good enough offensively to stay in games despite their defensive efficiencies to having fewer defensive efficiencies, while also being able to put up 95 points on anybody in college basketball. So I think that again, McNeely's health is going to determine just how good this UConn team is because their ceiling is a top, like I'll say like a 4 or a 5 seed. And they are a 4 or 5 seed. That's not as good as the 2023 kind of a team, but good enough to be able to pick off some people and get to the second weekend. And once you get to the second weekend, you got to win a 4-game tournament to get to the Final Four. So I still think that the ceiling is there when Liam's back, but I've said this multiple times. While watching this team, enjoy the growth, enjoy the development, enjoy the ride, enjoy that this is something where it might end up being a 2-year kind of a deal and a 2-year kind of a project where we look up in 2026 and Solo and Jalen are kind of carrying UConn to a championship. Last thing I do want to note, I had a couple people ask me about UConn's the way that the late game offense kind of works. And I do think that more than anything else, the lack of really having a true point guard and playmaker and go-to guy really shows up there. When you have, let's just use Tristan Newton as the example, right? When all else fails, you could isolate Tristan Newton, put him in a ball screen, put him in a DHO, put him in something, and you could kind of trust that he was going to find a way to be able to get a good look at a 3, get to the lane, draw a foul, get to the lane, score, draw a help defender, and kick out. Like you could just defend that. You would know that if you put him in an isolation situation with 10 seconds left on the clock, one of those things was probably going to happen. Now, when you got Haas in those situations, he can probably get into the lane and finish. He's pretty good at getting to the lane and kicking out and finding someone, maybe hitting a roll man, although that's not necessarily his strength right now. A lot of his assists are kind of functions of finding open jump shooters in the flow of the offense. He's probably not creating an open 3 for himself, right? He's not the greatest when it comes to getting fouled. So I think that you lack a little bit of that elite playmaker at the end of a clock. So what Dan has tried to go to is late in games, they run one of their actions. And I think Xavier is the perfect example of some of the risks of that, right? When you run a set where it's designed to get an open 3-pointer, it kind of turns into a he makes it or he misses it situation where you created the look that you want. You got a 40% 3-point shooter shooting a three. So 40% of the time that shot's going to end up going in, right? And that's what you want. Like when you're talking about having like the big picture kind of way to look at sports, especially basketball, when it comes to analytics, is you want to do over the course of 100 repetitions of whatever that action is, the way to get the highest margin of scoring out of that. And for UConn, running sets to be able to get a 40% 3-point shooter wide open threes is the best way to score the most points over the long term of a game. On a specific possession, it means that 60% of the time that possession is going to end up in failure. Whereas when you are able to put the ball on the floor and go to the rim, like Tristan did, maybe 50% of the time he's going to make a shot. But you also got to factor in that there's the potential for him to draw a foul. There's a potential for him to be able to create a shot for somebody else. So there's many more ways for you to be able to find a way to be able to succeed on that final possession when you have someone that can create and go to the basket. And UConn just doesn't really have that right now. So what they created on that first attempt was a wide open. I keep saying wide open. It wasn't wide open. It was a good look at a three, about as good of a look as you could ask for in that situation for your best shooter that just didn't happen to go in. They get the offensive rebound, they run it back, and Xavier's able to kind of blow up the action so that you can't get Aiden Mahaney into. They wanted to get Aiden Mahaney into a DHO, going to his right hand to get to the rim, and they weren't able to get to it because Xavier's physicality kind of ran them off their lines and ran them off their cuts. And what ended up happening was Haas comes off a screen, makes a bad pass to Jaden Ross, who has to like pick it out of the dirt, basically. Doesn't get the open look from three that he would have had, has to put the ball on the floor, takes one dribble too many, and there's a shot clock violation. So without having that late game creator, that's kind of what they are forced into doing at the end of a clock. And again, and not to beat a dead horse, but I really do believe that having Liam McNeely in those situations is going to be something that helps. And this is the way that I would look at it, right? I'm kind of throwing the stuff that happened late in Maui out the window because I would just make the argument that if over the back fouls get called the way that I believe they should have been called, the Memphis win is or the Memphis loss is a win and the Colorado loss is a win, right? Dayton, I think there was a confluence of factors there. I'm willing to, the committee's not going to do this, but I'm willing to just kind of overlook that as a fluky one game kind of a situation. Against Baylor, late game execution was really, really good. Against Gonzaga, late game execution was really, really good. Against Xavier, late game execution offensively was really, really good. What they couldn't do was get the kind of stops that they needed in overtime, and a lot of that has to do with Xavier. But against Butler, at Butler, late game execution was really, really good. Against Butler, at home, it wasn't quite as good. Providence, that was more of a they built up a big lead and missed some free throws, and Providence made some shots to come back, right? Against Villanova, I don't think late game execution was really all that impressive. Against Creighton, I don't think it was all that impressive. Against Xavier, in that last minute, there were some things that they could have done better. So I do think that those results are being impacted by not having Liam McNeely, even in the micro samples there at the end of games. So I feel like I'm just kind of saying the same thing over and over and over again. But when UConn gets Liam McNeely back, that's when we can start evaluating this team again. And that's when we can start discussing about just how good this team could be. Because I will say this, while the wins over Baylor and at Texas and Gonzaga and at Butler, I guess, well, those wins don't look quite as good as they did at the time. Those are still really, really good wins for a team that was finding themselves and peaking in the right moments. So get Liam back, and then we can have a real conversation about what this group is going to be, what their ceiling can really be, what their seeding can really be, and what this season can turn into. So I'm not going to drop in the audio from After Dark from Saturday night here. The conversation wasn't really all that interesting. I reiterated a lot of my thoughts here in this part of the podcast. But until then, keep the positivity, man. Like we don't keep the positivity, keep the positive vibes, and just remember that win or lose, you can never ever question the effort that those kids are playing with. And I promise you that the hurt that they are feeling after those losses is 5 times the magnitude of what UConn fans are feeling after those losses. So keep the positivity, man. There's a lot of times when those guys are going to need to feel the love. So until next week, I don't know. We'll see. If Liam is back, I will do a episode after the Paul game, just to kind of talk about what his impact looks like. But until then, Marquette on Saturday at Marquette, St. John's next Friday at home, Creighton in Omaha, February 11th. Those are going to be the 3 biggest games of the year, in my opinion, in the regular season. And if UConn can find a way to win 2, I mean, ideally all 3 of them with Liam back, you might just hear me saying the rack on this podcast again. So until then, I will see you guys on the other side.